Good morning and good afternoon for who is living in Italy. I'm Fabrizio Giustarini, the director of U.S.A. office of the Italian Trade Agency. Welcome to this webinar regarding the U.S. market opportunities and business development and the incentive focus. Today we speak about the opportunity that the U.S. market gives to foreign companies regarding the investment in U.S. And we have like partner the GSLI and NAI joining with us like a speaker and panelist. First of all, I want to thank Brooke, Eric, and Chris for accepting our invitation. And now I switch into Italian for greetings and welcome to Italian companies. Buon pomeriggio. Innanzitutto vi ringrazio della numerosa partecipazione a questo webinar che abbiamo ritenuto importante organizzare per darvi un overview su quello che il mercato americano offre in termini di business development e anche di incentivi forniti dai vari stati per quelle aziende che vogliono investire negli Stati Uniti. Come sapete, il mercato americano, nonostante tutto, nonostante anche il clima mondiale, è comunque in crescita, garantisce comunque stabilità e quindi è sempre un mercato ottimo, direi io, per pensare ad un investimento all'estero per un'azienda italiana. Per parlare di questo oggi abbiamo scelto un'azienda, un'agenzia leader in questo settore che è la GSLI, che a sua volta collabora con un'altra agenzia che si chiama NAI Global, e abbiamo tre speaker con noi, Brooke Edwards che è la Project Director di GSLA, Eric Cranesorge che è il CEO di GSLA e Chris Shoup che è l'Executive Managing Director di NAI. A questo punto lascerei la parola a Brooke. Vi auguro un buon webinar e vi ricordo che alla fine delle presentazioni potrete, o durante anche le presentazioni, potete porre le vostre domande all'interno della casellina Q&A che vedete in basso al vostro monitor, alle quali daremo tutte le risposte di cui avete bisogno alla fine appunto dei lavori. Grazie ancora. Brooke, the floor is yours.
All right. Welcome, everybody. We want to thank all the Italian manufacturers and organizations on the call with us today. We are incredibly grateful to spend this time with you guys, and we want to thank ITA once again just for this opportunity. And we have greatly enjoyed partnering with them to bring these resources to all of you on the call. So thank you again for having us. Eric, you can flip to the next slide. All right, so selecting the right location. So our presentation today is about how to effectively expand your operations into the United States. Selecting the right location for your U.S. manufacturing plant, distribution facility, or office is a complicated process. We're not going to sugarcoat that today. As a company evaluating the U.S. and its opportunities for your business, we say it's very critical to have knowledge of the process and the information that you should really consider in making that decision. Every company has unique project needs, and so we hope that this webinar is helpful for you to just provide more clarity on that process. So today, the things that we're going to go through on the agenda is the speaker intros. You're going to get to know who's on the call, also meet GSLI and NAI Global, the two companies that are providing some resources and information today. And then also we're going to have a discussion about selecting a US site and what the process looks like in that equation. Okay, so meet our speakers. So my name is Brooke Edwards. I'm the project director for Global Site Location Industries. I work directly with companies looking to evaluate locations. So that's domestic companies in the US, but I also work closely with companies all across the globe that are looking to expand into the United States. So I help manage that entire process from start to finish when they're digging dirt and cutting the ribbon on their site that they just built. We also have Eric Kleinsorge, and Eric, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself, but he's the CEO and chairman of GSLI. He's been doing this for 27 years, so glad to have him on board today.
Yeah,
And
just a quick note, founded the company back in 1994. Over the years, we've been blessed with working with thousands of companies, helping them find the right site and the right location, and putting together strategies to make their process much more simple, especially if it's an overseas expansion or relocation. So I want to thank you guys for inviting me. Looking forward to the presentation.
And we also have Chris Shoup on the call with us. We're excited to introduce him. He's with NAI Global. We actually started working with Chris about 20 years ago. So we've had a partnership for quite some time, and he's helped us relocate our actual headquarters that we're sitting in right now. So he's had about 40 years at NAI Global. He's advised hundreds of companies across the country with their real estate needs. So that's why we thought that he'd be an important piece of the equation for today's call, because he helps guide companies through every single phase of the commercial real estate process. And there are multiple phases, but he, in the end, wants to help the company maximize their real estate decision. All right, so we'll go on to learning a little bit more about who GSLI is. So we are a leading site location advisory firm specializing in site location analysis, incentive negotiation, and economic development. So three most important things I wanted to leave with you guys today is that we help companies find their next site, whether that's manufacturing, distribution, or an office location. We work very closely with the companies to identify and negotiate optimal economic incentive opportunities. So that was something that was mentioned. I'm sure some of the companies on the call today are looking for incentives, and we actually help negotiate what an optimal package would look like for your company. We also work with the communities very closely, so local, regional, and state communities and organizations to help them present the best sites and opportunities to your business. So that means we want to find the best sites, the best locations, the best workforce that are going to be the right fit for what your company is needing in the US. So this is just an overview of some of the successes that our company has had over the years. We've helped create over 53,000 US jobs through all the different projects we've worked over the course of 27 years since Eric founded the company. What this equates to is over $6 billion in total capital investment added into the United States communities. We have a network of over 5,000 municipalities, localities across the United States, and these are called economic development organizations. So we'll touch more about who those are and what they can do to help your business further in the presentation. And we've also negotiated millions of dollars for new capital projects and incentives. So this means millions of dollars that we've helped our clients save and or add as a positive value to their business growth needs here in the US. I'll hand it over now to Chris just to give a good overview. Chris, this is obviously just an overview of the United States and how he operates with NAI Global, but we've had a very close partnership with him, and we're very grateful that he's helped nationally help clients identify locations from the West Coast to the East Coast of the US. So Chris, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about NAI.
Chris, you're on mute.
Here we are. And good morning again. I didn't realize I was on mute. Good morning again. And this slide represents our locations across the United States. From the slide, you can also see that we have about another 100 plus locations actually across the world, and about 5,000 brokers and advisors, counselors within our network. What we've done is we have represented companies all across the country. It represents about 200 locations. The country, if I'm sure you all are fairly aware, is relatively large, and it's about 3,000 miles across, and every market is a unique market. The states have, every state basically has a different tax plan. Some states are income tax free, and others are considerably different with inventory taxes and real estate taxes. So we help companies kind of wade through all that as part of this whole decision-making process. And the next slide, Eric. This slide really represents a database that we help maintain. So we also can have the ability to, once we go through criteria of how a company is looking at things, whether or not they need a port or their rail, or basically their goods and services come through, air. We can help them, guide them across the country and look at these different markets by different property types. So this is just an example of what that might look like.
Yeah, one thing you really want to consider right now, if you're an Italian-based company, considering the U.S. market, there's different levels that you'll be considering, whether or not you're in full manufacturing mode and need a manufacturing facility, down to distribution. And we work with a lot of companies that are really want to establish a U.S. presence through a sales office. So they'll set up through what we call incubator programs within communities, and then grow into the distribution phase and into the manufacturing phase. So right now you kind of want to think of where you are in that process, and know that us and communities in the U.S. can help guide you through those different stages of growth.
So our joint mission as GSLI and NAI Global has 4 steps to it. So first, we 100% want to understand your company's unique growth needs and requirements. As I mentioned, every single company is different. We know there's a lot of different types of industries represented today. So, if there's a woodworking company, that's quite different than what a plastics manufacturer is going to be needing in terms of a facility or the type of labor that they're looking for. So our goal is to fully understand what your needs are. Second, we want to make sure and ensure that our clients are fully equipped with the information needed to make strategic site selection decisions. We need you to have all the information that is out there that is pertinent to your needs, and make sure that we're helping guide you through that process as efficiently and smoothly as possible, because we know there's a lot at stake, and these capital investments are very large. So we want to make sure that you are feeling confident and secure to make that decision to the best of your ability. Next, we want to help identify it's okay. Help identify the best location options. So as Chris mentioned, and you saw on that map, there's a lot of locations across the U.S. and we wish it was easy to just throw a dart at the U.S. and say, let's locate here, but it doesn't work like that. And we recommend that you don't do that. There are numerous factors to consider when you evaluate locations that are going to best suit your needs as a company. So we're going to go through a little bit about that on the call today. And last thing, we're going to create a competitive environment to guarantee the financial savings and a positive return on the investment that you're making. So our goal is to make the most optimal setting for you to maximize your incentives that you're going to get from the local and the local community, as well as the county and the state that you are starting to consider for your next operations.
Yeah, and if you could, in the chat box, while we're going through this, go ahead and type in what type of industry you're within. What type of industry is your business, and what type of industry would you be looking at opening a facility in the U.S.? And we can make sure that we're taking a deeper dive in some of those industries.
All right, we thought this was kind of a funny picture, but when you think of expanding your business into the U.S., does it ever feel like this? we've worked with so many companies that have said, I know I need to be in the United States. We have expansive growth happening in certain parts with a small office. We have a market that is just accelerating very quickly, and we see a need to be in that specific region of the US, but it just feels like, where do I get started? The US is so big, just as Chris said, 3,000 miles across. So our goal is to just help aid in that process. So we just want to guarantee that selecting the right site, it is an undertaking, but there is hope. And that is just our goal today, is to help provide some hope and process that's going to help that process seem a little bit easier as you go through it. So the things that we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be focusing on just what the state of manufacturing looks like in the United States right now, some of the trends and focuses that companies in the US are really kind of honing in on. Also, how to have an efficient site location process. What does it look like to have a process? Where do you start? What are the factors you really have to consider? How do you work with US economic development organizations? What is an economic development organization? If that's something that's new to you, we want to make sure that you know who the important local and state players are, partners, stakeholders, people that are going to be able to assist you in making that decision. And then also negotiating and obtaining ideal financial incentives. So I make a note on one of the slides that incentives are not going to cover a poor site. They're not going to fix having a really bad site. So our goal is to help you understand what incentives are out there and how to go about finding them effectively. So we're going to start here with the 5 US manufacturing industry trends to watch. Essentially, this is just our way of saying, hey, these are the key things that US manufacturers are really wanting to focus on. And this actually comes from a Deloitte 2023 manufacturing outlook study. So they did a study with thousands of US executives of manufacturing companies. And these were the 5 key elements of manufacturing as we go into 2023 that they're really stressing as opportunities, as challenges for manufacturers. So the first one's technology. So what's happening is manufacturers are significantly increasing their digital investment over the past few years, and that is only continuing. So what that means is they're adopting emerging technologies. Eric and I attend trade shows quite frequently in the US. Many of you companies might have attended some manufacturing events where you're showcasing your product or learning about new products in the market. So as you can see, there's a lot more emerging technology and advanced digital technology that's now coming into companies. And so that means that those facilities are now implementing that type of technology. And that's purely to help increase their supply chain visibility and to help adapt to supply chain challenges. Talent and workforce. This is probably something you guys have heard about in the US. There's a very tight labor market right now, and workforce churn is expected to continue. And it seems to be a main priority for US manufacturers to really address. So I was talking with Salvatore yesterday, and I said, some companies, especially US companies, say a company is moving from Illinois down to Texas. We have to talk with that company and explain, just because you're moving to Texas doesn't mean it's going to magically solve your labor issues that are happening in Illinois. So we just have to make sure that companies understand that we can do everything in our power to help find the right labor and get them connected to the resources that are going to help them find qualified labor for production lines or for warehousing. But it doesn't mean that just moving somewhere in the US is going to magically kind of find, fulfill that labor need. So manufacture. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I was going to say, Brooke, if I could chime in on that, that is probably the number one reason right now that U.S. companies are contacting us to help them find alternative locations in the U.S. is a lack of workforce. So it's very important in terms of not just seeing if the workforce is there for you today, but is it sustainable, and will it feed your company with workforce? So I would move that really and put a star on that whenever you're putting together your location decision, and say, what is build a profile? What's the exact type of workforce? What are the skill sets and how many? And that can really drive your site selection in terms of finding the right area. But that's probably the biggest challenge right now in the economy, the way it is, not just in certain states, nationwide. So very critical to make sure you have a good handle on your workforce.
And the U.S. is incredibly focused on developing workforce. Every single economic development organization, from a local, from a county, and from a state perspective, is investing billions of dollars and numerous resources to help upskill and train their workforce. We have incredible colleges here, very qualified individuals. And so it's just about finding the right location that's going to foster that type of labor market that you're looking for when you need to hire these types of employees. So this is a positive thing. Manufacturers are definitely looking for approaches to strengthen their talent retention. And that just looks like, pay increases, upskilling, diversity, equity, and just inclusion, and also just flexible work arrangements, working from home, and having that remote work possibilities. Next thing is supply chain. So according to the Deloitte survey, about 72% of surveyed executives believe that the shortage of critical materials and the supply chain disruptions are going to continue. So that is not going to stop at all over this next year. So what they're doing is really focusing on digital technology, again, to help mitigate that risk. So many global OEMs are increasing production capacity in the States. So what we're seeing is more global companies moving into the US. If they have a large customer base here in the US, they want to be able to get closer to their customers so that they can help reduce the issues of supply chain. We saw that throughout the pandemic, and that is still ongoing. So many of our ports are still clogged up, and many of you probably realize and know that it's affecting your business too throughout the past few years. But that's why companies are coming back into the US with manufacturing to be able to kind of speed up that process to get to their consumer quicker. Smart factories. So manufacturers are just making more investments to put technology into their facilities. Again, like I said, we are at numerous shows that we're just seeing just these advanced robotics that are going into factories. Companies are putting a lot more focus in the amount of automation that's happening and just laying that technology foundation to have smarter factories, more efficient factories. And about 60% of manufacturers in this survey are investing in specialized technology. So that's only going to increase. Last thing, sustainability. So companies really have to focus on the environmental, social, and governance landscape of what it is to do business and be sustainable. So that's kind of a focus right now in the US, is just developing better capabilities for waste management, increasing supplier diversity and just compliance, making sure that suppliers are being compliant, and then just elevating their buildings, adding improvements, building buildings to be smarter and have higher technology so there's less waste and they can become more carbon neutral. So this is kind of a part of what it looks like to start identifying sites in the US. We usually work with our clients and we have about a 5-6 step process. So these are just some small insights that I want to leave you guys with from our process that we have seen has just increased the ability for companies to find that ideal location. So we'll start with using multiple phases in your search. So what we start with is a request for information. This is essentially just a very clean format that says, hey, local city, hey, local government, this is exactly what our company is looking for as we start our search. We need this type of building. We need this many employees with this type of skill set. We're going to be manufacturing this type of product. We're considering locating near a port. We need a rail serve site. So these are just all the parameters around what your actual needs are for that location. And
something there. One thing that I identified in doing searches, they change, the areas of interest change on average of 8 times. And what I found is lack of knowledge or lack of education translates into lack of interest. So the more you know about individual areas, the more likely you'll become interested in that area. So issuing out RFPs and RFQs out to a general population allows that education process to take place and you to become more in tune with how individual areas are going to help you. And that's one one way of tapping into a key network that can issue out those RFPs.
Yeah, it's great, Eric. And to piggyback on that, it's like you're focusing on gathering the information about the communities and their available sites to really decide if that community is going to be a good fit. So just as you saw on that map that Chris had shown with all the little pins across, all of those are different communities that offer something unique for your business. So when we craft this RFI, it really helps hone in on the reason why a community or an area of the US would be the best fit for what your business is looking for. Next piece of that is deciding to be confidential or not. So what is the best for your business strategy? Sometimes we see companies that say, absolutely not. We have to have a code name because we don't want our competitors to know about our growth strategy. We don't want them to know we're moving into the US because that could cause them to want to move into the US at the same time. So we want to respect what strategy you guys have in place to grow into the US. And also, there are times when a public RFI process, that means we're going into the US and everyone knows it. And that could be advantageous to your business as well, because it helps to create potentially a competitive environment to see what states, kind of like Amazon moving across the US, all the states knew about it. And so they were able to really compete against one another for Amazon to say, okay, we're going to locate here because this is the best opportunity for us. So next is choosing RFI recipients. So really narrowing that geographic scope of your RFI. So Chris will talk a little bit more about what this looks like, but there are quite a few factors you really need to consider as you evaluate the geographic location in the US that you really want to look at. Why do you need to consider the West Coast towards California versus middle of the United States versus the East Coast and towards New York City and that market over there? So there's reasons why you can't just throw a dart and say, we're going to locate here and not have any reason or rationale as to why. Sometimes location bias comes in because maybe your company, you visited New York City and you're like, oh, I love New York City. Let's move my company here. But is that the best location for you to consider based on all the factors that make up your company and the needs? Some other locations across the US could be 10 times more optimal or helpful or beneficial for your company to take advantage of versus just picking a location and moving there.
And some of the driving factors of helping make that decision is it a talent situation? Do you need a certain workforce? Is it a resource? Do you need certain resources for the production? Is it a supply chain? Do you need certain infrastructure and customer driven? So if you kind of narrow it down and say, hey, this is the driving factor of my success, that'll start helping you narrow down different geographic locations.
Okay. And keeping it simple, that's one of the things that we want to focus on, or actually, excuse me, providing project information. So you're only going to request information that is important to your project. So it's only going to be relevant to what your company's needing. Keep it very simple. Focus on the non-starter items. So the issues that are very critical to your operations, because we kind of talk about having must-haves versus nice-to-haves. So a must-have, say your company has to bring in your product through the port. So that means you really need to be close to a port so you're not, wasting on shipping costs because your location is very far from a port. A nice to have would be potentially having a rail line, even though you don't need rail. It'd be nice to have it because it could save a few cents per ton on your rail volume, but it's not a necessity. So you need to make sure that that's very clear in the RFI whenever you're articulating that out to the communities. And the last thing, I'm just going to keep moving through because I think I have a lot of content, but I want to keep it moving, is just review, compare, and remove. So some of the US communities provide way too much information and others just fail to provide the critical information that you need. So the goal is just to effectively review this information so you can quickly eliminate sites. Your goal is to eliminate these communities or these regions of the US as quickly as possible from your list. This is just a very simple view about what our site location selection process looks like. We take companies through a 5-step process, and it really helps get you to that point of final selection. Our goal is to find the most optimal location for your business needs. It's going to be the most beneficial for what your company needs, and this is what our process looks like that we'll take companies through.
Okay. So what we've really done here is we've combined the GSLI process and the NAI global process kind of under one screen here as an explanation. And we really begin with a process of, again, understanding your needs and then understanding when do you want to be up and running. And, we'll add some realistic items and goals to that, because it's always a little bit longer than what you probably think it might be. But if you look at the bottom of the screen, it's saying opening new facility. Is that a 9-month timeline? Is it a 12-month? Or is it a 24-month? All depending upon, is that an existing facility? Is it a facility that might be under construction, or is it a facility that's from a ground up that we're going to have to understand, where in what community, and then it's from, I say, ground up design, drawings, permitting, and everything else that goes into that. And that can easily become a 24-month or maybe even sometimes longer, depending upon that process. But what we do in this process is Prospect Live. Actually, Eric, why don't you jump in and tell me?
Yeah, Prospect Live. Prospect Live is probably one of the game changers for me in this industry. Over 27 years, the opportunity with the pandemic opened up things like this. People are used to Zoom. People are used to working from home and communicating with their offices, and government offices have opened up their computers to allow teleconferencing. Prospect Live, we do not charge for. We bring a company that has a project in confidence live on a presentation like this, and we'll invite cities around the nation to come in and listen to what their needs are, listen to what's going to make them successful in a U.S. location. What are the tipping points that they're looking for to help those cities really understand if they're a good match or a good fit, and to respond to an RFI. So within a 45-minute Prospect Live, a project can be introduced to hundreds of communities, and then we issue that out to over 3,000 communities to get really good intel and feedback on the project. And that is probably one of the most exciting things that I like to do, are the Prospect Lives. So
what's really unique about this process, about this webinar this morning, and about the GSLI NAI Global Partnership, is that in majority of cases, companies might deal with a company like GSLI that is solely focused on community and community information, or they may focus just on a real estate company and the real estate side of it. What this process does is it brings everything under one umbrella. So we work in concert while we're talking to communities and we're understanding what they have in their own inventory. And then we also at the same time are looking back in our databases and our research, and we're looking there as well. So we're covering really several different bases at the same time. That is unique to our approach. So I think that's an interesting thing or important thing to point out in this. I'm trying to think of anything else I might say about this, except to reiterate what Brooke already said, that staying to a process is incredibly important. And the very, very first thing here about the needs assessment at the very top line is incredibly important. So we really spend some time understanding and helping you all understand exactly what those needs are. And it may be as simple as we need an office for about 10, 15 people to get this off the ground, or it may mean we might need a laboratory, we might need manufacturing or whatever. But all that is brought under a design program that we'll help you with from the very, very beginning that will define the process.
And to touch on that, everyone's processes are unique. So we try to stay within these formats here that you're seeing on the screen, just with the process, but 9 to 24 months. We worked with a Sri Lankan steel manufacturer who said, we need to find a site in the US in 6 weeks. And so we were working diligently to go through all of these different processes here to fit to what their needs were. So we're always willing to work with the needs of the company. Now, I don't always recommend 6 weeks because it is a quite strenuous search on our end, but there's definitely ways that we can work with you in order to make sure we fit with your time frame.
And I might add that sometimes, again, might bring a little reality to the picture of saying that is unrealistic or
Yeah.
whatever that situation might be, because that does come up. This slide really talks about all the different factors, and I'm sure that everyone that's on the call today, some of this may be just very, very basic, and you're saying, yes, we certainly understand this, but beginning with these things, such as the skilled labor force, is really at the core of what we're talking about, as well as what are your transportation needs, and so forth. You can't ignore the other things like, well, that community is great, but does it have the infrastructure to really support your business moving forward? And it may not. So that is something else that really everybody needs to pay attention to. The other things might be just basic design issues, design and engineering issues, about basic floor loading. If you have a distribution, racking, other issues like that. And then finally on this bottom, the last item down here, a business climate. What is that business climate have been historically? Are they being moving in a new direction? Are they from a zoning standpoint, and I'm not familiar with what your zoning issues might be in Italy, but in the United States, again, that really varies from community to community. And zoning basically is a governmental oversight of what can and cannot be built within certain areas of a community. If you take Houston, for example, Houston does not have any zoning. So they always kind of go through the process, kind of the laissez-faire process of we'll let the market determine what's the best and highest use of a property. But in most cases, they're the exception. And in most cases, communities are going to define this is an industrial area, or this is an office area, or this is a residential area. And if you want to go into an area that is going to push the limit of what can be done, then that's another whole thing that may come up where you petition the community to do something different. The other thing I think that's important under business climate are the codes, ordinance, and permitting. Some communities are very, very easy to work with and flexible in these areas. Other communities are frankly difficult and take much longer time to go through the permitting process. Also because of our past few years under COVID, there's been an employment issue sometimes in these communities where they don't have enough employees that are actually making these things happen. So that delays problems. So at any rate, we help guide companies through all those things. And then when at the very bottom says local and state taxes, again, I want to reiterate that, within our 50 states comprising, the whole United States, every state has different laws on the books and different taxes. So that's something else that is part of the whole process and ultimately the whole package that we look at.
Yeah, and the real importance of this slide, and we'll be sending this slide deck out for your all's review. Cities will want to know all of this information before they truly engage with you. So having a clear understanding of each of these sectors is really going to help your process move more streamlined, because from start to finish, they'll ask one of at least all of these topics to help them understand how they can best help you.
So I just want to quickly touch on this about working with economic development organizations. Their sole purpose is to promote their local communities' grow their local economies and help create jobs in their area. So there are local EDOs, which are from the city. Then there's county, which is kind of more of the region that the city is located in. And then there's state economic development organizations. So they help with land, labor, and capital. It's like a three-legged stool. So they all have to work together to support that stool seat. And their sole purpose, grow their local economies and create jobs. So like we said, you're going to be working with the local, the county, and the state throughout the entire process that you're looking for a site. So just knowing we kind of can help those companies navigate how to work with all three components as you're finding your site.
And a quick tip there, it depends on the state. There are certain states like Louisiana that work from the top down. You won't work with the local communities in terms of when you come to incentives and things. And other states like Texas, they work from the bottom up. So you'll start at a local level and navigate through the county and then up to the state. So understanding where those incentive dollars are coming from and who to really communicate with is really critical in making your job easy in finding a site.
Last thing we want to just touch on is how to navigate the incentive playing field. So there are numerous things that we could talk about with incentives. So I'm just going to scratch the surface for the sake of time. But basically, you really need to know what you need and why you need it. So state and local governments, as well as the federal U.S. government, provide various types of incentives to help encourage business growth and investment in the U.S. They want the jobs. They want U.S. workers paying taxes, buying gas, groceries, homes. So it helps spur the local economy. And so incentives come in various types of forms, and they all fall into different categories. So it's really helpful to know and review the incentives that the city or the county or the state are offering you that is actually going to have impact on your business. So just a few examples, you can think maybe grants. We've worked with companies to negotiate free or discounted land, even tax exemptions, speeding up the permitting process, fee waivers, tax abatement. So all things that add to your bottom line and is a savings back into your pocket as you consider that location. So all of these are just meant to help increase the profitability of that location that you choose.
And really what you want to ask yourself is, why do you need the incentive? Is it going to help you become more profitable or more successful in the location? Does it help you ramp up from 50 to 100 employees much quicker? Does it help you get through the gestation period of your startup? We worked with a box manufacturer that it took 2 years to really get their water solution dialed in. So those incentives, and they needed a rail spur. So getting the city to help fund the rail spur, cut to the bottom line. And if there's incentives that help make you successful, they are more likely to be granted to you. And one real key there, having a buffer of someone negotiating between you and the city really creates a more positive environment. A professional that is asking for those incentives doesn't look like the community or the company is just asking and begging for money. It really explains the picture of the job of the incentive negotiator to help make that company successful through their startup, therefore investing more into their community on the long term.
Eric, maybe I think it'd be helpful if you commented also about getting back to the competitive environment where you are really also having communities compete for the business. So you might have narrowed it down between within the state or maybe between two states. But you might comment about the competition and how that helps at the end of the day.
Yeah, competition is healthy whenever it comes to incentives. There are certain states that really want your industry over another state. So if you're considering another state, they may dig deeper and want to help you more because either their workforce is prime for that and they have a real need, or the opportunity. There's opportunity zones. There's market tax zones that they're trying to help depressed areas and will give grants and money. So incentives are a tricky thing. They're a positive thing if presented in the right way. And so creating a competitive environment and knowing exactly how those incentives are going to cut to your bottom line and help you be successful are two keys to really making your incentive negotiations effective.
And I'll just touch, oh, all good. I was going to touch on the last comment, review offers and determine the real value. So you want to focus, sometimes it sounds like, free money, that's great. But like Eric and Chris had talked about, sometimes there are really tight requirements that a company can be subject to, or there's really minimal financial impact on your project. So you want to look at that incentive offer to really determine if its real value is going to be received and realized by your project. So you really have to focus on the cost of actually doing business at that location, regardless of having incentives, and then consider what it looks like with the value of those incentives offered after the fact. All right, so we want to open up this time for everybody. If you have any questions for us, this is all of our information here. We left our emails on the screen. If anyone wants to reach out with additional questions or wants to continue the conversation, but I know Salvatore, and if you guys want to filter any questions, I don't know how you guys are wanting to do it, but we're here for this time to help answer any questions.
Yeah, there's a
you guys
little
may have.
Q&A chat bar down at the bottom. If you have questions, go ahead and filter those in. That's what we're here for, just help answer questions. And if after this, you need to reach out to us, it's the www.gslisolutions.com/get started.
Okay, thank you, Brooke, Eric, and Chris. Thank you for your very interesting presentation. Before opening the Q&A session, I would like to introduce my colleagues here in Houston, Salvatore Grignano and Giulia Salmaso. We are your point of contact in U.S. for your investment project. Of course, we can provide you basic information and also contacts about your needs, and going to more specific requests. Of course, we can forward your request to our professionals and like the one we have today. You have also the direct contact of Brooke, Eric, and Chris, so you can also email them with your question. And now I would like to ask Salvatore and Giulia to introduce themselves and to manage the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fabrizio, for the kind introduction. This is Salvatore Grignano, ITA Houston. I would like to thank Brooke, Eric, and Chris for the wonderful presentation. I think it was spot on it, and the message was clear. Yeah, we're here for any question. I would like to let Giulia also introduce herself before we open up for a few questions. Please be sure you add the question on the chat.
Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Giulia Salmaso from ITA Houston, and together with Salvatore and Patrick, we follow the technological sector and industrial sector in general in Houston. And so should you ever add any specific question, curiosities, or willing to go further for whatever topic we just touched during this webinar, we are here for you. I know it's always difficult to break the ice after such an intense webinar, but really Brooke, Eric, and Chris are here even for very basic questions or very basic curiosities. And of course, if you have, late curiosities after this webinar has ended, you can reach us to houston@ic.it. We can talk in English, we can talk in Italian, so we're totally available for you. We do have actually a question. It's in English. I'm sharing it, okay. Claudio Lanfranchi, good morning, I'm Claudio. I have a question concerning small European highly technological companies seeking to penetrate the US market. These companies are in need of funds to move their operation in Houston. Fundraising becomes very challenging because such USA-based investors as VCs consider these companies in the early stages for the fact that traction is not proved yet, of course, in the local market. Are there any opportunities out there to overcome this type of obstacles? What would you recommend pursuing? Thank you in advance. And the second question is from Aldo Zaffaroni. Based on your experiences, is it possible to have some example concerning the incentive spread, which form they have? Up to you. I don't know who want to answer this. Brooke, maybe, or is it?
Eric, you're mute.
Yeah, are the questions clear enough?
Yes. Eric, I was going to say, I know the first one might be the
Yeah,
best
go ahead and
for
take a
you to-
stab at it, and I can chime in also.
Okay, well, I was going to say we've worked with quite a few companies that have needed funding, quite a few startups. So this is not anything new to us. This is not new to the communities in the United States. They actually have local investors that they save who have a significant amount of investment just prepared, or kind of funds prepared for these types of projects coming in. So that is one of the benefits of working with the local economic development organization. So you mentioned Houston. I know Houston is Greater Houston Partnership or Greater Houston Chamber. They actually have certain types of funds that you can tap into when you work with the local economic development organization. They learn all about the type of project that you have, the types of funds that you're seeking, and they'll see if there's any investors, angel investors, other companies that would be interested in partnering with you to provide the funds to start your business in the US. So there are numerous resources. Most local and regional economic development organizations have those types of investors. So there's always an opportunity to be able to find that. It all starts with a conversation and just kind of articulating what your company's needing when you start with the local group. Sometimes we say, don't go through the VCs because those economic development organizations have their own investors that you will only learn about once you start talking with them.
And sometimes whenever you have a product or a business plan that is executed very well, the incentives that can be granted can help give confidence to the investors, and those communities have those direct connections with those investors who's in the community that is looking to put money into projects. We've worked from anywhere from a $500,000 startup fund all the way up to $24 million. And from there, those are the kind of the ranges that we personally worked with. And the industries have been furniture from Europe, a super magnet company that was producing magnets for engines, and really just a variety, but it really did depend on the proven solution and what the valued market was in the US for the local EDs to partner you with a venture capitalist.
So to touch on that question about what's the spread concerning incentives,
Brooke, just a second, sorry to interrupt. I just want to add on this before we move to next question regarding the VC part and the fundraising to Claudio Lanfranchi. They asked the question. Well, Claudio, if would be great if we can get in touch after the webinar. I mean, ITA, part of the service that we provide is exactly that, try to help you out, navigate the investor or the innovative ecosystem, and we can support you in find the right connection and everything to start the conversation with VC or the target audience you're looking for in order to raise the funds that you need. So maybe we will reach out after the webinar, but you're more than welcome to send us an email, and we would like to dig through to see what we can do, especially if you're looking to Houston, which is our backyard pretty much. Sorry, Brooke, let's move on the next question. Go ahead.
That's okay. I just wanted to touch on the question about the incentive spread by Aldo. So what we do is we actually work with the company to kind of understand the capital investment that project's going to create in a local community, and also what are the job needs. So that's what these local, regional, and state economic development organizations really consider when they want to put together an incentive package. How many jobs are you creating? And most of them start at 25 jobs as a minimum threshold in order to incentivize or provide a financial incentive to your organization. So there are some companies that say, well, I'm only creating 10 jobs. Well, if those 10 jobs are paying over $100,000 US dollars because they're, advanced engineering jobs, that might be a significant benefit to that local community to actually want to incentivize. So when you think about 25 jobs, that kind of starts with the production side. If you're paying more than minimum wage for that local community, say it's $10 an hour, or if you're paying $25 an hour, that is going to be a sizable payroll that is then going to come back to that local community. So we really evaluate the specifics of what your project's trying to do, how many jobs you're looking to create, and what that actual investment is going to look like in that community to help provide a case study. So it's essentially, Eric, what do we call it? A economic impact study that community can say, okay, this is the type of impact this company is going to bring into our area, and here's what we should incentivize them based on that impact. We've worked with companies that we found, like Eric said, about $500,000, upwards of multi-million-dollar projects. I'm working with a company right now that's out of Southeast Asia, and it's a steel manufacturer, and their project is about $325 million in capital investment. They're creating over 300 jobs. So we actually have a business case to come forward and say, we're looking for a minimum of 30 million or around that range for incentives based on these factors. Mind you, we work projects of all sizes, so that is kind of on the far side of the spectrum in terms of size. But most projects, they want to consider between 10 to 15, even 25 jobs before they really talk about incentives.
Yeah, if you really want to know if your project would qualify for incentives, number of jobs created, but not only number of jobs, total payroll. Then what is your capital investment, business property and personal property? And then what's the scope of the project in terms of size of facility, what types? Those are the most basic 3 factors that you can plug into that impact model and get a rough idea of what the return on your project would be over 10 years, because that's what a city does is they say, hey, if they move here over 10 years, we're willing to give this project this much money through abatements and incentives, and that'll be offset over the taxes over a 10-year period. So that's really the best starting point for you to say, hey, and the number of jobs, if you want to put this down, is 25. Usually anything above 25 jobs is where a community will start talking and say, hey, let's discuss incentives with you.
Sorry, Brooke, please go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to mention, Eric mentioned real property versus business personal property. Real property is the amount that you're going to be spending on your actual land that you're going to be building a facility on, or it's the cost of the existing building that you're going to be purchasing. So it's that structure that's going to be on the site. Real property or business personal property is any equipment or fixtures that you're adding, and they count that. They look into the dollar amount of equipment that you're putting into a building. Say you buy a property for $5 million, you build a facility for $10 million, that's all real property, but you're adding $50 million in equipment into that facility. That is part of that capital investment that they will want to incentivize.
Sure. Another couple of questions. Marco Colombo, can an Italian company with an already existing distributor in the US benefit from the incentives you mentioned, or are there other kinds of incentives should it want to expand the footprint and start the operation in the US? And a second question from Marta Rigotti. We do have a commercial branch in North Carolina, and our activity is to resell machinery for ice cream and, wow, bakeries and pastry. Wow, this time of the morning for us.
I know.
Can we benefit for some incentive to sustain that kind of activity, or do we need to have a specific project on that to be sustained or supported by any public incentive?
Yeah, you always want to go back and drill down to the most basic question. Is this job or is this company going to create additional jobs? And if you can answer yes to that question, then you can go from there. If you have an existing distributor and you're looking at, we're working with a company right now in that exact situation. They do trailers and they're importing them from overseas. And now they want to move into manufacturing so they can get their product to market faster and meet the demands of their customers. That project would 100% qualify for incentives. If it's a distributor, and you're looking at opening up a warehouse to ship the product to and get it out to the network quicker, those jobs in that facility would definitely qualify for incentives. But if it's, I can't think of an example of working with an existing distributor and finding incentives from that. But it's important really upfront to really understand and really communicate with ITA and say, hey, here's what our profile is. Here's exactly what we're looking at doing in the US. Let them build that profile and then communicate either with us or the other individuals about, okay, here's exactly what the plan is. And we can feed back and say that would qualify or would not qualify.
And to expand on both of those questions that were just asked, what we're trying to say in the most simplest of terms is usually incentives come with new capital investment. So that means a building is purchased, land is purchased, new jobs are getting created. And when you consider those three things, that is when a city can say, here is why we'd be able to offer you incentives. It's a business transaction. So they have to get something out of it for you to get something out of it. So if you already have a distributor, you already have a network, you already have a sales team, you already have all of that in the US, the only way they're really going to be able to assist is if you open up something new outside of that, because those are already established. And if you're growing a facility, say you have a location that has 50,000 square feet and you're expanding and you're adding another 50,000 square feet, well, that's more capital investment. They're going to want to help incentivize that. But if you're just working with a distributor who has a warehouse, who's already, operational, they already have jobs, that's going to be a very tough sell. And they don't usually consider that as a part of the conversation. So you have to just think, what's going to be the new type of investment that I'm going to be making? Or is it worth creating our new operations there instead of working with distributor network, but maybe we do it ourselves and create a facility or employ jobs in that warehouse. So that's really where that is going to be beneficial in the conversation, a kind of a selling point for them to start offering incentives.
And Marco, to answer your second question, absolutely. That's exact situation that you would want to present to a community in the US and say, hey, we're looking at taking this from a distributorship to warehousing or to manufacturing to deliver market. That is a reason for a community to give incentives and say, hey, let's get this company over here to the US.
I might just add, to clarify, Brooke and Eric, you also have the example, though, you might have an operation that, let's say in North Carolina, that for one reason or another might look at relocating that operation to another state. So it's an existing operation, but they are considering relocating to another area. And therefore that opens up the conversation again about is another state a viable option for them to operate in.
Yep, that's correct. And we've helped numerous companies leave their states. That means that was no longer a location that served them. They were either losing money, the shipping costs were too exponential where they're at. The business climate was not conducive to growing in that local state. So we do help companies get out of a current state to a more healthy, more beneficial business environment to do business in.
I think we don't have so far any more question. I think that the answer has been pretty clear to me. So the intention of the trade-off, it's quite basic to grasp, in my opinion. Maybe we can wrap it up. Maybe Fabrizio, you wanna close everything and say goodbye.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. Well, I think in about 1 hour, we gave all the most important information about how to expand the business in US market and how to get incentives for the countries, and also how to get in touch with the right people, with the right professionals who have a great experience in this field. So again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to the Italian companies for attending this webinar. We remain at your disposal for any kind of feedback or any kind of information you might need. Our email address is houston@ice.it. Thank you again, and thank you to Brooke, Eric, Chris. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Salvatore, and have a great day. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.